are going through a big challenge, everything is heightened, the good and the bad. And when we develop the resources to be able to remain as grounded as we can and come from a place of a broader perspective, which is what really empowers us, then we can see the joy and the beauty in even the most challenging thing. Hello and welcome. I'm Sharon Gilmore Glover. I am thrilled to be your guide here on the Sharon Hour. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me again. I'm not going to sing today because you will notice that my voice is a little croaky and hoarse. That is a side effect of the chemotherapy that I'm on. But I can speak and I feel great. And every day I feel great is a tremendous gift. So I'm going to carry on. I was talking about previously when I first really realized the importance of saying yes, and accepting and allowing. As I mentioned, my mentor Fred often says to me, you know, one of our biggest challenges in life is that we divide experiences into those that we like and those that we don't like. And we're at peace with those that we like, and we're not at peace with those that we don't like. And really, the spiritual journey is about learning to be at peace with both of them. And that's not to say that we don't pretend that we're going through hard times. Hard times are hard times. Being a cancer patient certainly has very low moments. However, because this is happening at a point in my life when I am so well resourced and I have a long-standing practice that supports and uplifts me, my really low points, well, we could check with the people who spend the most time with me, but my experience of me is that my really low points, there are a lot less of those than there are of good times and even really great times. Because when we are going through a big challenge, everything is heightened, the good and the bad. And when we develop the resources to be able to remain as grounded as we can and come from a place of a broader perspective, which is what really empowers us, then we can see the joy and the beauty in even the most challenging thing. And part of that starts with accepting and allowing. So I realized as my friends gathered around me at this very challenging time earlier in my life and helped me pull together very, very quickly the ability to be on a bike trip for a month on Prince Edward Island, as soon as I started saying yes, as soon as I stopped saying no, everything opened up and it just magically flowed together. And before I knew it, I was getting on a train and on my way to a beautiful island off the east coast of Canada. And in that month, I said yes to everything. So as I was on the train, part of what I did was I was thinking, what was I going to do on what's my trip going to look like? And I thought, you know what? It's a small island. I'll do the whole island. I'll sort of start from Summerside and I'll head up around, I'll cycle around the whole island. And I had this whole big plan. And I stopped at the train station or the bus terminal, I guess, and bought a bunch of maps and was planning out my route. And I loved the Anne of Green Gable books, and Green Gables is a real house. It exists on Prince Edward Island. You know, obviously I was going to go there, me and every other tourist. So I had this whole thing and I had this whole plan. And then the night I arrived, so it was a very long journey. The train was 28 hours, then I had to wait for the ferry. I can't remember how long the ferry crossing was. I think it was at least an hour. And then I had to cycle 10 kilometers to get to the nearest provincial park. Well, there were gale force winds when I arrived. And I had a light mountain bike with panniers on the back. And the panniers were basically like sails. I was in very, very good shape. I taught one of the things besides teaching leadership at this camp leadership center I was working at in the summers, I also taught kayaking and board sailing. So I'm fit and active, I'm in great shape. That wind was so strong that as I was pedaling my bike into it, if I stopped pedaling, I got pushed backwards. Like, I've never been in winds like that. I live in the middle of our country, not on the coast, had no idea that wind could really be that strong. I'd certainly never ridden a bike into it. So when I got to the campground, there weren't a lot of other people there. In fact, there was one other trailer. I had a small tent that was freestanding. I could easily put it up myself. That was the point. It was so windy I couldn't. It was going to be ripped out of my hands. So I went and knocked on a trailer and asked these two older people to come and help me put up my tent because I couldn't have put it up otherwise. And as I sat in my tent that night and listened to the wind ripping through the fly sheet in the tent, all I could envision was my fly sheet being shredded and therefore me not staying dry in my tent. And I thought, well, I guess I'm going to go and find a camping store tomorrow and buy a new tent because I'm going to need one. That night, I made a decision that scrap my plan. I'm not going to, in an organized way, go around the island. I'm going to go whatever way the wind is at my back. That's what I'm going to do for 30 days. Whatever way the wind is at my back, that is where I'm going that day. And as it turned out, on this very small island that has 3 counties, I only ever made it to 2 of them for lots of reasons. A lot of it serendipitously, the people that I met, but a lot of it was the wind. I really did stick to, I'm not cycling into the wind for any length of time. That whole month-long trip, I met musicians, I got invited to private parties, I got into the musicians' warm-up trailer at a very famous fiddle festival and saw 2 of, in the 90s, Celtic music was huge. And there were 2 fiddlers from Cape Breton Island off Nova Scotia in Canada who became very, very, very famous. And Natalie McMaster won Grammys for traditional and roots music. They were teenagers at this point, and I somehow found myself in the musicians' warm-up trailer, and they were there as youngsters warming up, and their talent, I was just just a few meters away from them, and their talent was palpable. And I had so many magical experiences. I ran into friends of mine from home. I knew they were cycling out to the Magdalen Islands, but I didn't know we were going to meet up. And in the midst of this huge fiddle festival, I saw these 2 faces from home, and we spent a couple of days cycling together. And one of my most magical memories, they're singers as well, was sitting on a picnic table, watching the sun go down, singing in 3-part harmony together. Like, it just was this magical, transformational journey. I got invited to spend a night in this old house with a woman who was in her 60s and her mother. And they had, I don't even remember exactly how I ran into this woman, but she invited me in and let me have a bath. And while I was in the bath, she came and knocked on the door and said, "Are you a vegetarian?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." "Why do you ask?" "Well, I'm making you dinner. I just wanted to make sure I was going to make." So she made me dinner. And then when I came out of the bath, I said, "What prompted you to ask if I was a vegetarian?" "Oh, my son cycles and he's a vegetarian." Okay. She had a fascinating life. This woman in the 1940s, after doing her war service in World War II, traveled the world by herself. Women didn't do that then. To be able to hear her stories and then hear her mother's stories was just so fascinating. And that all happened because I said yes. I accepted and allowed. I spent a lot of time with people on this trip, and I also spent a lot of time alone because I was staying alone in a tent. And so by the end of my day, after dinner, I went into my tent, and I had a candle lantern, a safe candle lantern for tents, and I had all evening to myself. So I did a tremendous amount of journaling. And that gave me the reflective space to look at, why did I say no? I said no so reflectively to this trip. And I reflexively, I had, it just came out of my mouth before I even consciously formed the word. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. There was no reason for me to not go on this trip. I didn't have to change anything. I had no other plans. I wasn't working. There was no reason for me to say no. But I did, and I started thinking, where else do I say no to my life? And why did I do that? So I created an exercise that helped me dive deep. I'm going to share it with you in a worksheet form. In the end, it's very simple and very powerful. I opened up my journal. So I had 2 blank pages beside each other. And I wrote down issue or fear. Where did it come from? Do I believe it? Is it serving me? New belief. And I did this over many, many days. This was weeks really. This was a big reflective exercise for me. And I started uncovering beliefs that were driving my life that were not my belief. They weren't my belief. They were beliefs that I absorbed from my parents, who absorbed them from their parents. And one of the beliefs that I absorbed from my parents was, well, a couple of them. You don't accept charity, ever. We never ask for help from outsiders. And a single woman does not accept gifts from men to whom she is not related. Now, that third one, to put it in context, my parents were born in the 1920s. My grandparents were born in the 1880s and the 1890s. And they were born in Britain into the lower working classes. And that class system was strongly and rigidly in place, and people had to stay in their class. And people in the lower classes were vulnerable to the power structure of people in the upper classes, especially girls and women. So that last one of a single woman does not accept gifts to men to whom she is not related made a lot of sense then, because it would make, especially if that girl or woman was working class, her virtue would become suspect, and then that made her damaged goods, and then no one would want to marry her, and women needed to get married to be safe back then. And not only that, the gift would probably come with expectations. And so she would be obligated to do what that man wanted her to do, was the thinking. So that probably made tremendous sense in the 1890s. It made no sense for my teaching partner, who had no designs on me except to lend me his bike, to say, hey, equal partner, I'm not using my bike. You need to decompress. You have too much going on in your life. Take my bike, go to Prince Edward Island. You don't have time to buy a bike of your own. Get one in the autumn. If you wreck my bike, you have to replace it. That was the only strings attached. But those beliefs had been running my life, my whole life. Where else? And then I started documenting other times where I said no to things, or I said yes, but then felt so guilty and so uncomfortable that I didn't enjoy the experience. Every single one of us is run by unconscious. Most of what drives our life is unconscious. When we are in a spiritual awakening, it is about becoming conscious. Conscious of the world around us, conscious of the intangible world within us and around us, and conscious of how we live our life. You are being driven by beliefs. Some of those beliefs are your aligned, authentic beliefs, and some of them are not. And you need to become consciously aware of what they are. So at the end of this, I'm going to leave you with an example chart of that journal exercise. I strongly encourage you. I can't tell you the impact that that had on my life. And I've shared that with lots and lots and lots and lots of people since then in my work. It's made a huge difference. We absorb and download. If you're interested at all in learning about that, Bruce Lipton and his work on epigenetics really dives into, I'm not an expert on any of that, but I do know it dives into how we are programmed and where we get our downloads between the ages of 0 and 6 and 7. And we all absorb, this is what our world is, here's how we live in the world, this is what your role is, this is how you need to be. And that's all meant to keep us safe. And as we go on our awakening journey, as we live our hero's journey to find our own path in the world, we have to figure out what part of that is authentically aligned to us and what part is not. So go on the journey and take the time. And all you have to do is look in your life. Look at where you're saying yes and look at where you're saying no, and then dive into why. What belief is driving that? Where did it come from? Some of my beliefs I couldn't track back to where they came from. For me, it was interesting and helpful to really know where they came from. And sometimes I couldn't figure that out. And that was okay. I didn't really need to. The really important one is it working for me? Do I believe it? And there were so many beliefs that I was living by that I didn't really believe. As I freed myself from that, it helped me understand what my actual core values were. It helped me crystallize my purpose for being here and embrace that more deeply and more boldly. And it helped me to more clearly define the kind of life I wanted to craft for myself moving forward. If I had not gone through the process of first realizing I was being driven by beliefs that were not mine, and then going through the exercise of doing the work of untangling from them, I don't think that I would be living the life that I'm living now. I'd be living the life that others thought I should to keep me safe. The world, we're in a very different time from when I was born. Very different time. It's essential, really essential for the survival of everything on this planet that we wake up, all of us, every human on this planet who can, wakes up and starts living consciously. If you're listening to this, it's because you're waking up or you've woken up. So keep diving deeper. If you are in a difficult time in your life, say yes. Know that there is gold in the difficulty, in the awfulness of it. The real gold that shines through my life today is the gift of my daughter's death, even more than her life. I would have given anything for her to live, but that was not her journey. So then my journey became finding the gift in the truth of her death. If you are going through a hard time, I am sorry, hard times are painful. I'm not sugarcoating it, they're painful. But if you can find the courage to say yes and go on the journey and do the work, I promise you it will be worth it. And you're not alone. Go to the Facebook community, Flow Network Facebook community. We are gathering there to help support each other. The New Earth Project is a very large supportive community. It's all about supporting people waking up. They're all over the place. Go find them. And find the people in online or in your own community who are also going through this journey. You're not alone and you can do it. And trust me, it is worth it. Thanks for joining me today. Keep your light shining brightly.